Lala Barina, an elegant dancing Temnoceran that at first glance seems to be a spider or tarantula, but upon closer observation has just as much in common with insects as well as spiders. Here we can find it resting in its nest, glowing webs strewn about. These web colors are a result of the sap found on the trees washing into the various rivers and streams found within the Scarlet forest. Most notably during the fallow, where the light rains loosen the sap, we can see that its leg ends have become completely stained by the crimson waters, giving this beautiful gradient to its outer shell. Lala Barina mixes this sap-soaked waters with its neuroplegic bodily fluids to produce these vivid crimson reds. As to why it chooses to do this is not entirely clear. However, during the first encounter, Erik remarks about the scent of the florets found on the forest basin. Perhaps these strong scents could be used to attract prey. As well, we see many jeweled scarabs eating these saps on various trees throughout the forest. Unlike spiders, Lala Barina only has 4 legs. Despite this, its front 2 appendages, being referred to as claws, have a striking resemblance to the forelegs we often see on various mantis, serving more as an arm and a tool rather than a walking appendage. These also resemble the pedipalps that are of an exaggerated size given the proximity to its jaw. Consider these pedipalps in spiders typically serve as sensory and sometimes even reproductive organs, is more likely these were inspired by the aforementioned mantis forelegs. We can sometimes observe it using these claw arms to eat as well as stabilize itself when drinking water. So it really is sort of a rather creative blend of all these things happening at once. Observing its eyes, you may find it has even more than at first glance, boasting 6 compound eyes and 3 simple eyes. Tarantulas in most cases have 8 eyes, and rely more on their sense of touch through various hairs as a mean to sense its surrounding. With this, they also do not have any compound eyes, despite how strange the eye arrangement on tarantulas and spiders can look. Upon looking at various insects, I discovered that they have very similar eyes to that of a dragonfly. Dragonflies have 2 large compound eyes on either side, as well as 3 simple eyes or ocellus eyes on its front, much more closer to that we see within Lala Barina. Dragonflies are also known for having some of the most complex vision, and seeing how Lala Barina's eyes are, I can only imagine how impressive its vision is. Even Lala Barina's chitinous exoskeleton resembles more closely to that of a dragonfly than a spider. Looking at its body structure, it is a lot more truncated than that of a tarantula, or more closely to smaller spider species, wasps, and even bees to some degree, further pushing its overall design way farther away from a spider than one might expect. Observing its stinger, it is easy to say that this will pierce any large monster's outer protections with ease. I love how it looks too, having these sort of segmented fleshy bits in between, as if it can retract and expand with a varying amount of ease, having all these segmented muscles in between. This is a very clever way to change up how we traditionally recognize retractable stingers on real-life animals, like those we often see on various species of wasps and hornets, whereas instead just one giant stinger and lacks all these weird little individual joints and segments in between. Now for one of its most distinctive features, its large flower-like abdomen. Here's where Lala Barina houses its florets that it uses to paralyze its prey and predators alike. On observations, it will often kick loose all these florets, showering the area in a dangerous field, much like we see tarantulas do with the hair fibers they have on their abdomen. These hair fibers on tarantulas can cause a immense amount of irritants and deter predators and threats alike very quickly. The stories of how painful these hairs can be are all over the place and not something you personally would want to ever experience. The paralytic toxins on Lala Barina's florets are enough to stop even the largest monsters in an instant, as we can see with when a Doshiguma here attempts to hunt one. Glancing closer at these florets the Lala Barina releases, we can see that they are shaped similar to that of an erodium plant seed. This distinctive shape allows these to float down gently into their targets, and we often see many other plants have very unique seeds that allow them to travel great distances to help farther spread out. Things such as dandelions or even the little helicopter seeds we see in some species of oak tree. In the digital art book that came with the pre-order, these are also referred to being inspired by pampas grass in the way that they flow around through the air. And you can see this inspiration very clearly in the texture of the white fur, as they exemplify it strongly. Lala Barina often sheds off these florets, which I could only observe it doing near water sources. Even trying to force it to other areas, it tends to just sort of hang out in those areas and not do any of its unique ecology-related animation. If you observe these florets a bit more closely, we can find adolescent omenflies, and I'm not entirely sure why they would only be present here. It could be something very simple, such as these could be symbiotic insects living within the florets, or something that was attracted to the scent of the saps and is now attempting to feed on them in the water's edge. Nercylla are often seen with their offspring, so it could not have been too terribly difficult for them to have created models for the Lala Barina, but we never end up seeing these in-game. And even in the art we've seen so far, they never show the offspring. A bit of a fun little trivia, all of the Lala Barina weapons on their final steps are named after various tarantula species. Now, get ready for me to butcher some of these names. The longsword is named after the Ornithopton, the dull blades after the Harpoctiers, the sword and shield after the Asanfopelm, the lance after the Avicolari, the switch axe after the Salenkosmi? I can't get that one right. The charge blade after the Umenophore, and the insect glaive after the Stromatotopelm. All of the weapons and gear for Lala Barina are quite stunning when compared to many of the other new monsters' gear. And here we'll be taking a look at just some of it. The armors give off this notion of some old Victorian clothing, as well as looking at the other set, we get a more dancer's dress kind of vibe to them. Given that some of Lala Barina's attacks and its namesake are reminiscent of a ballerina, this fits quite well with the thematics of Lala Barina. The weapons themselves, upon reaching the final step, will end up blooming into the beautiful crimson reds that we see on Lala Barina's abdomen, just like the rose they are attempting to depict. And as we see these final steps, they also become covered in these various shiny and striking gemstones. It is surprising to see how diverse the inspiration for Lala Barina is, when on the surface it may seem like nothing more than a dancing spider. Is there anything you found out that I may have missed? If so, I would really love to hear more about other observations that I may have not seen myself. And that will do it for another Monster Hunter Bestiary, this time on Lala Barina. Over here, another video. Down here, another video. Over here, subscribe. And thank you for watching. And thank you to my member. Bye-bye. Bye.